listening to the Concierge Coaches Show with Bruce Cameron and Wayne Fritz, only on LA Talk Radio.
Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to another exciting episode of the Concierge Coaches Show here on LA Talk Radio. I'm Bruce Cameron. Wayne is going to be out again this week, but he'll be back next week with some exciting stuff. But speaking of exciting stuff, everybody, we have a special guest with us today. Very honored to have Detective Jason White on the show today from the First 48 in the Tulsa Police Department. Jason, thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you, Bruce. I'm honored to be here. Appreciate it.
Oh man, we just yes, pleasure is ours, and so glad to get you here. Well, I know that I've talked to a lot of people and fans and whatnot, so I have a lot of questions for you. But before we get to those questions that everybody wants to know, go ahead and talk a little bit about yourself. You know, coming through your surgical tech experience and growing up in California, making it to Tulsa, and kind of the story of how you got there. Yeah, that you told me.
Well, I started out life in California when it wasn't quite as crazy as it is today. When we ended up moving from California in 1982, my father was a California highway patrolman. That's what kind of was my first exposure to law enforcement, so to speak. And then from there, we ended up in Oklahoma. I can remember growing up that I used to tell my parents, I used to say, you know, the day I turn 18, I'm moving back to California and there's nothing you can do about it. and then by the time I ended up turning 18, I actually kind of fell in love with it. And I've been in Oklahoma ever since. I started out working at Baptist Burn Center, which is the fourth largest burn center in the country. And my job, making a whopping $4.50 an hour, is I worked in the tank room and I was responsible for debriding burn patients and doing burn dressings. And that's what I did every day. I did that for a total of 6 years. But sometime about 2.5 years into working there, I had an opportunity to work go through a scrub tech program. And those are the people that actually slap the instruments in the surgeon's hands, and kind of like MASH. And I did that for the remaining amount of my time, a total of 10 years in the medical field before I was fortunate enough to get hired by the Tulsa Police Department.
Wow. And did you start as a patrolman and work your way up that way? What was the route?
Yeah. I mean, everybody that works in law enforcement that you see out there on the street, all these detectives that you see across the country, you know, there's 17,000 law enforcement agencies across this country, hundreds of thousands of police officers, and everybody starts out in a police car. Everybody starts out in a uniform. I'd say that generally speaking, you're looking at a minimum of about 3 years before somebody is eligible to work in a specialty unit. You're not going to get into homicide in 3 years. I just don't see that happening. So you have to kind of build your resume as you go along with your law enforcement career. And I started out on the streets. I worked undercover narcotics for a couple of years. Then from there, I went back out to the streets, and then I got an opportunity. I had an opportunity, one that I never wanted to do. It was nothing that I'd ever reached out and said, I want to do this, but somebody had reached out to me and said that they wanted me to work as a school resource officer. And it was an opportunity. I took advantage of it. I did that for a couple of years. And then the opportunity came up for me to go to the crime scene unit. Wow. And I worked there for 1.5 years. And actually I've been a cop for a total of 26.5 years. And I've worked in homicide for about 14.5 of that. And, you know, I've been around a long time in the homicide world. And that was really my ultimate goal since I was a little kid. I know that's not normal, but for a kid to want to work homicide, but I'm one of those weird exceptions.
No, I know. I mean, like myself, working with, you know, sexual offenders and the Federal Bureau of Prisons is something that you don't necessarily see that coming, but it is the shoe that fits, man, and right. Fits well. Now I know for us in the federal system, there's a 57. Is there an age cap that you guys have, or they do waiver?
Yeah. Well, no, it's 45 years old, I think is the actual 45 is basically the
Youngest.
the cutoff. Well, the oldest. You can't be.
Oh.
It's 21. 21's the minimum. I'm going
45
to say
years
that.
of service. I see.
Well, yeah, 45 years old is the oldest that you can be to get hired, and the reason why that's for pension reasons.
Right.
It's, and I don't know if that's across the country. I just know that it's for in the state of Oklahoma. Now, there are exceptions. I mean, you could theoretically go to the Oklahoma State Bureau of Investigation. They do not have an age limit, and actually, I almost went over to that agency. I was looking very, very hard at it, and I thought that it would be a interesting place to segue to, but I ended up sticking around at Tulsa.
Okay. Very good. Very good. All right. Well, let's get to some of the questions. All right. What years did you wear the mustard color glasses? What years for that? What's that?
Well, those are bamboo, actually.
Bamboo.
No, it's bamboo, and we ended up. I'll tell you where I ended up getting those. Actually, I got those in Southeast Oklahoma at a store called. I'm going to give them a plug here. Not that anybody's going to be listening from this place, but it's called Girls Gone Wine, and they had a. They had a rack. They had a rack of just eyeglasses and stuff sitting over there. And I was just trying on different pairs of glasses. And my wife's like, "Oh my gosh, I love those. Those are the ones." And I actually liked them too. So I ended up getting them. And the problem that I had is that after wearing those for so long, I mean, of course, these are cheapo depot glasses. You know what I mean? Yeah. I wear the readers. I need to go and get my eyes really checked. But I've worn readers forever just because I sit on them and lose them and drop them, etc. But anyway, the problem was I couldn't get another pair of them. I had a heck of a time finding another pair of those, and I even went to lengths of, because I'd wore them for so long. I even went to lengths to actually call them that store, and they were like, they didn't know what in the heck I was talking about. But I'm like, listen, I'm telling you that these things existed. You sold them. And eventually I ended up getting lucky enough to find some more. So the answer to your question, what years? Well, it was definitely the first part of the first 48 that you saw us. We've been on that show since 2014. They started filming us. The show started in 2004, and they started filming in Tulsa July of 2014. So we're coming up on the 9-year mark. But I probably wore those glasses for a good 3 or 4 years for sure.
It is because there's the brown and then there's the bamboo Jason.
Yeah.
So.
Well, they've probably become somewhat of my trademark. People recognize me because of that. I have no doubt. But anyway, that's just kind of the way it works.
No, it is kind of a funny thing. Couple of fun things that we do is if ever we're watching the show, I wouldn't call it a drinking game unless it's, this Diet Coke, but so if we ever see like a cat walking on the street, the first one to yell cat, because they'll cut. Have you noticed that? They'll cut to a cat at a crime scene. So that's one. And then whenever a QT or a quick trip is shown, we scream QT.
Yeah. Yeah, I'll tell you what. The Tulsa County district attorney. There's a lot of DAs at the Tulsa County, and I think they did actually have a drinking game that they were like, when Jason would say, whatever I would say, there's certain things. We all have our little habits that we say, and I'll always tell them like, sit tight, one of those things. Oh, you got to take a drink, and so. But we all have our little ways of doing things. I'm sure. I know the idiosyncrasies of the other detectives for sure, and what they're going to go in there and say, etc. Some of them I like, and some of them I don't. There was one of them that used to, and this isn't a guy that you've ever seen on TV, but he used to always talk about the trick bag, and I'm like, what the heck is a trick bag anyway? Just weird things like that. But yeah, so. Well, I will tell you another thing, just to kind of go with what you're saying. I think there is a site on Instagram that it's like the cats of the first 48. Where there's somebody, somebody literally goes out there and puts up the pictures of the cats that have been shown. I think it's on Instagram.
Holy crap, that's amazing! But, thank you for
sharing. there are certain things like when they would film a lot of the episodes, they're using some of that footage from
Yeah.
other, they
Yeah.
kept showing this billboard with a bunch of these eyes on it. And I finally got to the point where I'm like, quit showing that scene. I'm sick of seeing it on
Yeah,
all these other episodes.
right. The birds on the telephone wire,
Yep.
the same pair of tennis shoes hanging over the electrical line.
Yeah.
But there's several stock footage things. There's a couple of black youth walking in a tank top, walking down a street. That could be Miami. Come
You're
on.
right. I know.
It screws me up because we have the DVR set to tape all of them. So whenever there's a marathon, it tapes the whole damn, there might be 50 shows. And so we have to kind of go in there and make this triage decision, because usually you can't tell by the title, right? Dead End, Prom Night, whatever, you know what I mean? You can't necessarily, there's so many episodes, right? And so we try to make these quick decisions. But if you stumble upon that stock footage early, you might be deleting a show unnecessarily. You know what I mean?
Right.
But you have to hear.
Well, since you bring that up, I'll mention something. I'll try to mention certain things that I've never said ever on any other of the podcasts. But one of the things that you'd mentioned is like the titles of the shows. They have a list. They have to check a list of all of the titles that have ever been used before. And the very first episode for Tulsa, I'd actually came up with the name, and the name was No Tell Motel. And I thought it was epic. I mean, what a name. They checked and they said, yeah, we don't think that that's ever been used, so we could use that one. And for whatever reason, I said a line in the episode in the first, it was called,
is that where dreams go to die or something?
No, well, I said this is where dreams end and nightmares begin. I have a lot of sayings that I've been saying for years, honestly.
Yeah.
But the episode, for whatever reason, I said something. Ringside Seat is actually the name of the episode, and I'd said something along the lines of, "Well, everybody here's got a ringside seat for what's about, for what just happened," and they ended up taking that name. But what I'm getting at is that you can never use No Tell Motel as the name, because they've already used it on the first. It was the kind of the name that they gave the episode before, but they won't use it ever again, which drives me crazy, because I love that name. I thought that was a perfect name for that episode.
That is
Sometimes we take part in that. That's one of the things that we'll sit around in the car going, so can you think of a name? And sometimes it sticks and sometimes it doesn't. So
are you allowed any input about the show? Are you allowed to have any artistic feedback to the producers or production team? Or
we are, to some extent. I'll tell you this. I would say that myself and Ronnie Leatherman, who was we used to run around together for a long, long time at the early stages of the show. I would say that we probably had a lot more to do with taking the film crews around the city to show them interesting things like oil wells. Right. And I thought this would be great. This would be great footage for you to B-roll, or I can't remember what they call it, but basically things like that. And we took them to all the great places to get footage. And so we have, off the record, we are always going, like we're set directors, we should have a credit for that. But yes, we do have some things we have some control over. We have control over, we watch the episodes before the general public gets to see them. And we can say, well, listen, take that out. We don't like the way that sounds, or things along that nature. And so we do to some extent, of course. And really, we had some control initially, and I would say we still do, that we told the production company, which actually it's not A&E, it's actually ITV. And then they make the shows, and then they send it and sell it to them. And we told them up front, listen, we don't want to have a bunch of camera people rolling through here and staying for a short amount of time. We wanted some continuity. Right. We wanted some long-term people that were going to stay here. Now, granted, we've had probably in excess of around 25 camera people that have been here over the 9 years. Right. But most of which have been long time, 2 people. We've had 2 people here since they started up. And then we also have another person that works behind the scenes that actually we have 2 people. We've got one of them that visits with the families and make
Okay.
sure to see if the families are okay with the episodes. They don't get to watch the episodes up front, but we
Right.
have to get their permission as to
Right.
whether or not we're even going to be able to show the
Double
episode. I mean,
spaced.
there's been some great cases that unfortunately the story is just a little bit
Is
too
there,
dark.
yeah, is there a Mylar balloons of first 40? I mean, sometimes when they say goodbye to the loved one,
Uh-huh.
the joke is that the production company gives the poor family balloons to send up into
No,
the air. No, that just
no,
happens.
as a matter of fact, we discourage that. And that's something that if people are going to complain about something, that's one of the things that you hear about regularly, where they're like, tell those families not to use balloons and stuff. And the reason why is because you don't want animals to eat those balloons and then die,
Oh
or
my God.
birds and so forth. But that's one of the things that people don't want. And we try to tell them, but when it comes down to it, and it's not, when I say we as the detectives really don't have, we're not there when they're doing the family scenes most
I was just kind of
oftentimes.
trying to make a little joke there between a latex and a Mylar balloon. I didn't realize the gravity of the
Yeah.
environmental impact study that you guys got to do.
Well, it's one of those things that, the citizens that watch these shows, that's one of the things that they
Wow.
don't like. And I'll tell you this, myself and Ronnie Leatherman, they actually filmed us burying a pig. Actually, did they film that? No, they didn't film that part. But me and Ronnie had buried a pig to study the grave, and they actually would go out there with us when we were out there, kind of doing our little notations and our scientific study, and we ended up exhuming the pig, and they filmed that, and it was like one of those things where there is no way in the world they're going to be able to show this. You can show a body.
Yeah.
The public can deal with that. But if you show anything that has anything to do with an animal, it's going to cause all kinds of craziness.
Yeah. I swear I've seen chunks of people's brains and stuff on some of the episodes. I'm like, holy cow, and the complainant or the dead body's just sitting there. So, okay, moving along. Is it true that Mobile is going to be out, or do you know about that?
No, I do. Actually, I was in Mobile, and I met with several of the detectives on their very last day of shooting. It just happened to be coincidentally that I was driving through. I had left from Florida, and I was driving. I have a huge travel trailer, and I was driving it through Mobile, and I'd made arrangements to actually meet some of the guys. I'm a fan of that city. And
yeah.
I really wanted to meet them, and I've communicated with them for years anyway. And so, with Julius and Jermaine, and there's certain ones that there's certain ones that I've communicated with from time to time on Facebook, etc. And so they were kind enough to meet me, and it was fun because there was people, gosh, they probably we both got recognized a bunch at the restaurant, and it was a lot of fun. So we had several people wanting to take photos with us, etc. But that was their last day to film, other than like for real. And then now they're still going back there periodically to kind of do some STCs, which are called scenes to come, or Right. I kind of called them WTFs. It's kind of like, why didn't this thing work the first time? Right. But nevertheless, that's what they kind of go back there, and they'll do some stuff like that. There may even be a time where they might do an after the first 48 later on down the line. What had happened is that I think that they had a couple of cases that ended up being not guilties. And I don't know the whole story, but I've heard little bits about it, and I've heard that they were not guilties. And then the defense attorneys kind of threw a huge fit about it, and they ended up pulling it, saying that something along the lines of, it's got to be the show's fault, which I can promise you there is no detective out there that is interested in doing the wrong thing and putting somebody in jail that doesn't belong there. But that's ultimately what happened. And that's the reason. There's been reasons for several of the other cities. I mean, Memphis, I think Memphis, the mayor had came on, and they'd had enough because they thought it made the city look bad. And
there you go. That's the one that that makes sense. Okay. And okay. Well, gosh, while we're there, is Louisville still in or out?
No, Louisville's been out of it for a long, long time. They've been out. They're one of the OGs. They're one of the
Yeah.
original cities that were on there. Miami was as well.
Any reason that you can share why Louisville went out and why Miami's out there?
I think that from what I understand, I think Louisville was, and I'm pronouncing it wrong. I'm going to get picked for that.
Louisville, right?
Louisville.
Yeah.
Yeah. They ended up pulling out. I think it was for some of the same reasons that they didn't like that. But I'll tell you that. I'll tell you this. With respect to Tulsa, it's been a blessing for us. We love it. The citizens here, there's not any, the citizens love it. Believe it or not, it brings in probably tourism money because we have people that literally fly into our city to meet us, or they'll travel here to actually part of their tour of our city. Some of them will stop by and meet us.
Wow.
So it hasn't been a negative thing for us in any way, shape, or form. As a matter of fact,
Yeah.
I'm actually shocked that more cities don't get involved in it. Really, I'm shocked. Right now, they're filming it in another city that you may not be aware of, though, that has not hit the television yet, and that's North Charleston, South Carolina.
Okay.
Which I'm incredibly excited to watch because it's always fun to watch a new city and to see. I learn things from them, when I'm watching them. So that'll be fun. That'll be fun to watch.
Now, was Larkin part of y'all's?
No.
No,
Sean was he was over the gang unit. He was the sergeant over the gang unit when he was here. I mean, I've known him forever. But he was over that, and that's when Live PD had actually started in our city as well, which I'll tell you right now, in my opinion, I think it was just too much. I mean, it was too much when you have a crew in our unit, and then you've got camera crews rolling around the whole city, and the way they operate is a little bit different than the way we operate. They are, if you think about it like this, they're proactive and we are reactive. So when you have a show, and the public loves it. I quite frankly, I think it's relatively boring actually, but the general citizen, they absolutely loved it. Right. And I just felt like in our city, when you got a cop that's pulling a car over in an apartment complex with a giant and then you have another car behind him coming out with a boom mic and cameras and all this stuff like that. Those are the same complexes that we're having to go to.
Right.
And we're trying to be respectful of keeping a little bit of some of the anonymity that goes on with some of these cases and so forth. And it's just a different style of policing. And I think that's one of the biggest things that the activists that were all over the country there's reasons behind it too. But
if there's a crime at an apartment complex and you guys are going to try to canvass, because they're not going to talk to you. You may get one or two stragglers, right, that want to talk to you right when you guys are saying this. But then, you guys want to do a canvass and have people talk to you. And like you said, if that's already kind of blown up because of what on another format show.
Right. Well, and I'll tell you this, I know some of the guys that are on that show. I know some of the cops. I met a couple of them from South Carolina, and I know more camera people. I know some of the camera people that have worked on our show that work on that as well. Yeah. And it's just a different deal.
Yeah, no, it's almost apples and oranges. But I am glad that Tulsa, not only that your citizens have embraced the show, but also your mayor and city officials are doing it. And again, count me and Deanne as two more coming up there to visit here soon. And likewise,
well, I'll give you a quick story. I'll give you, this is the story I love to tell people about the value of a show like The First 48. Okay. And there was a family, there was a man and a woman. They were probably in their mid to late 50s, and they had their daughter with them. And I think she was around 18 years old, and they had came up there, and one of my bosses, he had started talking to him, and I was up for the next murder. And he goes, "Hey, listen, you need to come out here and talk to these people because they may have some information about something. It just sounds like that. So you should probably hear it." So I go out there, and of course she was like, "Oh, hey, oh my gosh, thank you for all that you do." That kind of stuff. And we get that a lot. You'll get that a lot from citizens, which always makes us feel good. And so this guy goes, the father goes, He goes, listen, I got to tell you something. He goes, listen, I've been an ex-con over half of my life, and I was raised to hate the police, but you guys are great. You guys treat everybody the same. You treat everybody with respect. You're not yelling at people. You will work just as hard for this victim, regardless of what their socioeconomic background is, et cetera. And we're like, well, yeah, absolutely. That's what we try to do. And he goes, well, listen, the reason why I'm up here is because my daughter here, my 18-year-old daughter, she witnessed a murder yesterday, and she's going to tell you all about it. It didn't happen in Tulsa. She doesn't know where it happened. It happened somewhere in Northeast Oklahoma, but she's going to tell you all about it. And I said, oh, well, that's great. I said, do you mind if I take her back there and interview her for a little bit? And he goes, she's all yours. Just bring her home when you're done. And I was like, okay. So she ended up telling us that she was actually in the car with the people and basically was the driver after the murder. And she told us all about it. And she directed us to where burned up clothes were and where the suspect was. And this thing, it ended up happening up in Miami, Oklahoma. It's like it's Miami, Oklahoma, but it's pronounced Miami. And that's halfway between here and Missouri. And that right there is the power of the show, of where you have a trust within the community. The community, they feel like they know you. And you got to remember, the number one viewing audience of this show is people in many instances that they've had the cops in their neighborhoods. It's the people that have maybe served time. There's a lot of people watching to see who's talking and what's up, you know?
Well, let me ask this, because I tend to think, and this is as a consumer, like you guys have kind of been there the longest, I think, stood the test of time. I mean, when was it Dave, when he retired? I mean, man, I was boo-hooing, you know, when some of these guys retire, you know what I mean? They're not going to come on the show anymore. What is it about Tulsa? Do you think it's that just the fans and everybody loves? What is, I mean, you guys have a unique chemistry, you think? Is it just the blend of personalities and experiences? Like, what do you think some of the secret sauce is with you guys in Tulsa on the show?
Well, I think that number one, teamwork makes the dream work. And that's one of the reasons that we are incredibly successful. Just to give you kind of statistical data, since 1963, we've had roughly 2,790 plus murders that have happened within our city. And out of those, we've solved 87% of those. And since 2016, we've had roughly 560 homicides. And out of those, we've solved all of them with the exception of 28 or 29 homicides. And so when you look at that, that's a 95% clearance rate since 2016.
Wow.
The big reason is the teamwork. I think another reason is I think you hit it. I mean, we do have some different types of personalities that are located within the unit. I think that most of the detectives like one another. I say most. I mean, I'm not going to say that we're all just like love everything about everybody that's in the unit, you know, kind of a deal. I think that, but yet we can all work with one another. Okay. Right. We all can work with one another. Of course, we do have our preferences as to who we would like to work with. I would say we're human beings, and that's just kind of a human thing that goes on with it. But we can all tolerate one another throughout a case and so forth. And the other thing is too, everybody that's up there will work that case just as hard as they would as if it was their very own. And so if somebody has to be off or has to go on vacation, the wheels are not going to fall off the bus. We're going to continue to work it as if it was our very own case. And that's really the ingredients for success. You know, I have said this before on other podcasts, etc. And I'll say it briefly again, because I think it's valuable for anybody to hear this. And I've said this, and once again, I'm just a slick sleeve officer, so I don't have a lot of say in who gets selected, right? But I hope that when the selections are made, if I was the boss, I can tell you this: I don't care what they look like on paper. I don't care what their resume looks like. I want to know, does he work well as a team player, and is the individual trainable? That is right there. what you want. We don't want a prima donna. We don't want some loner. We don't want somebody that's some social misfit or socially awkward. We want somebody that's going to be a good fit within the team. You know, we're like a family. And in some instances, we actually spend more time with each other than we do our own families, really. And so we want somebody that's going to be a good fit. And that's what it boils down to. And for any agency that's out there and they're listening to this, they should really consider what I'm saying, because it actually it works. Plus, you got to remember where we work. You know, if you were to take our whole unit and stick us in New Orleans, we'd probably not solve many more than they do. I mean, it's just, you have a distrust for the cops in certain areas of this country where and really a real fear of retaliation. Whereas here, it's the heartland. Most people here, I think, ultimately want to do the right thing, and they don't want these knuckleheads running around any more than anybody else.
Right.
Kind of a deal.
Right. So I think that's really good. And I think from a whatever perspective, I know I have to correct my wife. She's a big Nate Schilling fan. So if we ever get up there, maybe she has to meet him. I guess he has some heartthrob stuff in there. But
well, I'll tell you something about me and Nathan have worked together longer than anybody. I've not worked with another cop longer than I have him. And so we worked together in crime scene. We've worked together, and I've worked in homicide longer, but he
does the phones and stuff. He's more of an electronics guy.
He does the phones, and he still knows how to work a murder. And actually, temporarily, he's actually back in the rotation. So you never know. He actually may be working a murder here and there. Okay. But predominantly, that's what he does for the most part. Is he does the phones and things like that, which is really, really helpful to us.
Absolutely. Well, that is fantastic. Let's talk about your favorite type of case. I know it's corny, but what would be your favorite type of case?
Well, I can tell you what it's not. It's
okay. That was the second.
Well, I'll do both. I hate working gang cases. They're the most difficult, miserable. The characters in those stories are characters that just drive. It's like I'd rather have my wisdom teeth repulled. You know what I mean? Than to deal with some of these people. That would be my least favorite, because they lie. It's tons of lies. Nobody wants to talk. Sometimes the victim is worse than the suspect, really, and at least in the eyes of the community.
Right.
You know, so in some instances, the community is glad that person is gone. And etc. As far as the type of case that I really enjoy, I like a case that has a little bit of mystery to it. And
didn't you just clear a cold case kind of last week?
I did. It was a 2015 case. Yeah, and I've cleared a handful of those. And you know, my oldest one is a 2002 case. That's a no body case. It's the only no body case in the history of Tulsa, the city of Tulsa. Wow. They've never had a no body case that has been, they've never had one that's been successfully prosecuted within the city of Tulsa. Right. And mine, they've only had 599 of those cases actually in the country's history.
Yeah.
And mine's one of them. Mine's one of 17 in the state's history. And so they're just extremely rare. So I was proud to do that one. But yeah, I like cold cases. Preferably the ones that aren't mine.
Right.
Because I already know the story of mine. I know why that thing's cold. I want to read somebody else's issues and see maybe we can find something there. But no, that was a 2015 case. That's a very interesting case. What I would like in a case is something, usually if it's like a female victim, it's lights a little bit more of a fire under me. Probably just the bizarre type murders where it's a little over the top kind of, you know. I've had a couple of cases where there was I had one that was a incredibly brutal rape murder where they had thrown the female in a dumpster. And in that particular case, you know, that was the type of case when actually I'll tell you a funny story about that one. Well, in that case I had we all heard it. We were all at work, but
there was a show on that one, right? The apartment.
There was.
I remember this.
And the detective that was on that was up for the next murder, she walked and told the boss that, all right, I'm retiring at the end of the month. Basically, she didn't want to do it. And I don't blame her. I mean, she's out the door in a month. It's kind of silly to stick her with a murder. And I said, well, I'll take it. I wanted the case. And he's like, nope, she's going to get it. And so she worked the case, kind of silly, but she worked the case. And then when she retired, I mean, I'd been working that case hard as if it was my case. And, and I remember Ronnie going, we're not going to just get knee deep into this case. I said, oh yeah, we are. Yeah. We're working this. We're going to work this case. I was obsessed with it. And so when she retired, I saw that case book. Sorry about my dogs. My daughter must be coming home. So when that case book basically was sitting on another detective's desk, and I said, what's that case doing there? And he goes, oh, well, it just got assigned to me. And I said, no, that's not your case. That's my case. And I took it back from him, and I didn't solve it. I can't take credit for being the guy that solved it, but it did get solved.
Yeah.
And just kind of one of those deals. But that's the type of case I like. You know, if I could pick a type of case, it'd be like the Manson murders. I mean, that's my favorite murder to really talk about. I love that. That case is just fascinating to me. But
I worked with Squeaky Fromm for 6 years. I activated.
No kidding.
I activated the woman's unit at Carswell, maximum security.
Oh. Wow. Was that the only Manson girl that you? Was that the only Manson girl?
Yeah, it's the only Manson girl.
With?
Yeah.
Interesting.
It was interesting. So, you know, can you imagine getting mail from Charles Manson? I mean, through the mailroom, you know, and interesting. I was trained as a psychologist, and they wanted me and others to sign for, let's say, an early release. And I was on record saying I thought she was a risk to the community because of her following of that cult. You know what I mean?
Right.
Following, and
that's interesting.
I refused to sign my name on that, and let my supervisor go ahead and do that. And then I promoted to Dallas. So that was one of those F up, move up things. I promoted to Dallas for other reasons, but anyway. So yeah.
Well, let me ask you something else on light of that. Did you ever have any other famous inmates that you had dealings with?
Heidi Fleiss.
Okay.
Remember Charlie?
The madam.
Yeah. Almost had Martha Stewart, but she kind of slipped my grasp there. You know, couple of there was a Henry Cisneros, who was a guy who was like a mayor of San Antonio. He had a paramour that made a mistake on an FHA loan. With the women, now with the guys, Manuel Noriega, Pete Rose, what am I black? Michael Milken, Pete Rose, Manuel Noriega, Jim Baker.
Wow. Okay.
Marion Barry. So back in that 89, 90, 91,
yeah.
I had a stellar profiling experience, but
it's interesting.
A little bit older than you, believe it or not. And so I kind of came in that wave, and the war on drugs, you know, and it was great. You know, those war on drugs money, and then they were making sex offender units. So I went into war on drugs and sex offender units just because that's where the action was. Those are my favorite kind of cases, and just kind of stuck with it. Next thing you know, I was right in around 24 years before I retired. But anyway, but you know what?
Well, let me say this.
About your podcast. You can have me come on your podcast.
Absolutely. And I'll tell you something, you know, see the prison industry is the prisons and murder. Those are two areas that the people are fascinated by, you know,
or even murder in prison, you know, the high rise, Oklahoma City. Is it a suicide? Is it a murder? You don't know sometimes, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I do.
Have these guys in these cells, and one of the guys is dead, and you get everybody out of there, and you conduct this evaluation. I did more of the psychological autopsy, where you interview and you look at their phone, and you know, you do everything around them. But yeah, man, no, it's fun stuff. So let's talk about. We got 11 minutes here, so I got to be a good steward of our time.
Yes, sir.
I told you this would fly by. Anyway.
No, it always does.
It always does. let's talk about your podcast. First of all, congratulations. Sounds like you have a station like we do that's kind of a home base, and kind of tell us a little bit about your podcast and what's it about, and give us the big teaser sizzle reel here.
Well, it's via KGRA Digital Broadcasting. They're the host network, and they basically are out of Utah. And the people that are actually like the show directors and stuff like that. Here, let me just tell you how this all came about. I actually was a guest on a show called I Detective, and the audio was terrible. It was on my end, and I thought, man, this just wasn't as good as what I wanted. But they said, oh yeah, this is great. This is great. We're going to probably have you on again. We might even have you be a guest host. And I'm sitting there going, yeah, right. I'm never going to hear from these guys again. But really what happened is that probably 4 or 5 months later, I ended up getting a phone call from one of the guys. His name is Chris DiPerno, and he's an ex-cop from retired cop from Syracuse Police Department up in New York. And he was the host, and he goes, listen, man, we loved it. How would you like to have your own show? And I was like, are you serious? And he goes, absolutely. We loved it. We think you'd be great. Da, 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 da. And I said, he goes, you can do whatever you want. If you want to have somebody on there as a co-host, we want you, whatever you want to do, whatever you want, we'll do, and by the way, you can do it however you want to do it. You can talk about whatever you want, anything you want to do. We just want you to do this. And I was like, okay, well, I might want to have somebody else join me to be, kind of my Ed McMahon kind of thing.
Right.
And so I actually called Ronnie Ronnie Leatherman. And the reason why I called him is because Ronnie and I, we had already talked about this for years, and we're talking pre First 48. We thought that would always be a fun thing to just do a little podcast, but we always talked about a lot of things. And so now that the opportunity was there, I called him up and I said, hey man, I think this would be a great opportunity. And, we didn't know what the name was going to be. I mean, it could have been the Jason White Show for all whatever I wanted to do. It could have been any of those. And I didn't want to do that. And so I said, listen, if you're interested, he goes, absolutely. And I thought, well, this would be great. And then we'll do it. And that's how it all came about. It's called Into the Fire. And the whole premise to the show is this. It is about, I wanted to be positive. I still work in the business. So, as well as I do that I can't just speak freely about my opinion on many things.
Correct.
Otherwise I'm going to end up in trouble. And so therefore I have to be very, very, I have an opinion, believe it or not. And one day it's going to be exposed. I can promise you, but for right now, I wanted to talk to people that were movers and shakers in the world of the criminal justice world. It doesn't even have to be criminal justice. And so that's what I've done. I wanted variety. And then I also wanted people that have made a difference in a positive way. And I think that we've been able to accomplish a tremendous amount of variety with having people from the corrections. And, I even have a prisoner from Jackie Muse is her name. And I just love her. And she was an individual that actually spent time, and she met me in federal prison. She was cleaning the windows in the lobby, and she goes, I know who you are. And I was like, oh yeah. I knew she wasn't supposed to be talking to me. I said, oh yeah. I said, how do you know me? And she goes, oh no, we all watch you in the cell block. And I was like, well, that's pretty cool. And she ended up messaging me when she got out of prison and sent me a nice video talking about her journey. And she actually used to be an RN for like many, many years, but she also was she had a drug addiction for 17 years, but she overcame that. And she's a fascinating individual. And that's what I'm looking for. Fascinating people. And that's what's been great. So for those of you that are listening, you can follow me, go to my Detective Jason White Facebook page. You are welcome to follow me there. And I post every episode on there each week. I give you the link to them so you can actually watch the video.
Follow me back, by the way. I sent you.
I will. And I will for sure. And we appreciate it. We don't make any money to do it. Maybe one day we will. I don't know. I'm kind of friends. Do what?
I was going to say, I'm in a podcast. It's myself and Wayne, and we control the
Yeah.
content, can say what we want to say, and we don't have to take sponsors.
Yeah.
I mean, we could take sponsors, but then we kind of take away from the show in one spec. But anyway, you'll figure all that out.
It's been a lot of fun. We're still ironing out some of the things. I didn't go to any broadcasting school, but then again, Ronnie and I, we have talked to people and interviewed people for years, hundreds, if not thousands of people each. And so that's not difficult for us. It's just, the thing of the little glitches that kind of come up from here and there that drive you crazy. But no, but feel free. I would love it if anybody came on board and joined us. We do live filmings where people can tune in live, and they can do that on Friday nights, 7 p.m. Central Standard Time.
Every Friday night, pretty much.
Every Friday night. It has been every Friday night since December.
Wow.
My wife has informed me that there's going to be a couple of nights that we're going to have to figure something out, like tape it, and a couple of my guests that are going to be coming up in the future. One of which is the lead negotiator from Waco. Fascinating guy. I met him I do a lot of teaching and stuff. So I get across the country, and when I'm speaking, I get to meet some fascinating people, and he's one of them. So I consider him a friend, and he can't do Friday nights. He's like, I just don't do Friday nights. So I'm like, all right, well, we'll figure something out. We'll figure something out and tape it. And that's what we'll do. Okay. And I don't know if are you live? Are we going live, or is this
we're live right now? We're live right now. Play Talk Radio. And and then it'll aggregate to all the iHeartRadio, Apple Podcast, Amazon, Audible, Stitcher. I mean, this really is the little podcast that could, man. It gets out there.
That's great. And that's what we kind of do as well.
I know. And that's why I want to have folks. So it's your Detective Jason White Facebook page. And is there another website or any other thing that you want people to
I mean, you can find me on Instagram. You can find me on Instagram. You can find me on Twitter. And actually, what you're going to get is if you actually leave comments and stuff, believe it or not, I actually respond to you. So
I know, right?
that's one of those rare. It's kind of one of those things that drives me crazy when people are out there and they're putting posts out, but yet they don't have the time to ever respond. It's like, come on. So I will respond to you, and that's just. I find it fun, and when I have the time, I do it now. I still manage to find the time to do it. I'm sure if it rose to a level of just crazy, then I might not be able to do it as much as I try. I just try to do it for everybody.
Well, I'm certainly glad that you do it, and that's how you and I came about, actually. So it was just that very phenomenon. So I appreciate you responding back to me, and there it is, man. We got it's been a pleasure, to meet you. I can't wait to kind of get to know you a little bit more as the
for sure
months and years roll on, and definitely we'll come up to see you. Hopefully,
absolutely.
Conversely, if you're down here in June, July, nudge, nudge, wink, wink, give me a call, and we'll be out down this way. So,
yeah, and you're in Dallas, right?
Dallas.
Yeah, and I might actually be speaking at the International Chiefs of Police conference. They haven't told me officially yet, but I do get around, and that's kind of one of the other things that I'll tell people. If I was to tell people something interesting about me, is that I've been very, very lucky that I teach all over the country. I'll be in a couple of weeks. I'll be up in Boise, Idaho. The next month I'll be in Rochester, New York. I'll be in Virginia Beach sometime in October. And I usually have about 3 to 5 dates that I have throughout the year somewhere in the country. And I speak on, really, it's crisis negotiating is actually the thing that I was a crisis negotiator for over 10 years. And that's kind of one of the areas that I've had the blessing of being able to go and speak about. But I love talking about death and death investigations. And that's why I was down in San Antonio a few weeks ago. So
well, good.
But anyway, that's me in a nutshell. Well, I'm going to be doing this job probably for another 5 to 10 years. And
10 years, make a note of that. Okay. Yeah. Well, good. Well, folks, I mean, there we go, man. Hey, we're going to be out of time, but hey, man, Jason, thanks for coming on the show. Appreciate it. And folks, feel free to see us on our Facebook page, Concierge Coaches Show.
Absolutely.
_coaches. And of course, I can be reached at conciergecoach.net. So until next time, have a blessed week. We'll see everybody here on the Concierge Coaches Show. And thanks again, Jason.
You're
care,
welcome,
everybody.
and thank you, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you.
You're listening to the Concierge Coaches Show with Bruce Cameron and Wayne Fritz, only on LA Talk Radio.